Hi, this is Donna Mullins. I am the president of the League of Women Voters of the Lansing area, and this program is brought to you by us and by the Environmental Advocacy Group, also known as the EGLEs, and we're really excited about having a program where we have two really outstanding speakers. Please use the question and answers to ask questions. Your chat is turned off and your mic is turned off. And now I'm going to hand this over to Val to take you through the meeting.
Thank you, Donna. Welcome, and thanks everybody for attending to be part of this important discussion for Michigan and indeed the nation. I'm Valerie Lafferty, member of the Environmental Advocacy Group. Elaine Fishoff from our group will be fielding your questions after the two speakers have given their presentation, and then those will be addressed at that time. So next, I'd like to introduce the our chair of the Environmental Advocacy Group, Ellen Link. Ellen?
Hello again. Welcome to our webinar on, oh, start my video. Sorry. I thought you did that. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Welcome again to our webinar on trash. We're so glad you're here. The mission of the Environment Advocacy Group is to educate ourselves, other league members, and the public on issues that threaten the health of our environment and all that includes. The birds, the bees, our water, ourselves. And trash, the dilemma that just won't go away. In other words, we'd like to save the world. And we know that sounds crazy, but as the saying goes, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one single step. We think of each forum we've held and each article we've posted in the Capitol Voter as single steps on a very long road. So thank you for joining us today on this journey. Before the pandemic changed our MO, we held forums on issues like Line 5, climate change, and recycling. We conferred with area schools and other organizations and advocated with the State League Board for their support or opposition on legislation. We created informative flyers, which can be found on our League website page. Elaine Fishoff got the city of Lansing to pass a climate crisis resolution, and she and Valerie helped convince the Ingham County Board of Commissioners to pass one as well. We're serious about this stuff, and since everybody creates trash, we knew it was time to revisit this subject because the questions and answers about trash are changing all the time. The thing is, there are so many environmental issues to care about that we could really use some help. So if any of you members or guests thinking about becoming a member would like to join us in this effort, we will welcome you with open arms and not a few emails.
Can you see the presentation, everyone? All right, just let me know if you can.
Looks good.
All right. Well, thank you for this opportunity. I saw a few familiar names on the attendee list and a lot of folks that I've never met before. So it's a great opportunity for us to be reaching out to some new folks. And personally, for me, just an amazing opportunity to meet some eager folks who are interested in recycling, and also to get to interact with Heidi, who's a real leader nationally on this. It's a huge privilege. If she ever gets her sound to work, it'll be a huge privilege for us to hear from her. I'm going to go through and talk a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about a lot of things, and I'm going to try to do it really quickly. I didn't think I would have to be as strict on my time because I thought I was going second, but just cut me off, guys, if I start going too long. I'm with EGLE. That's the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. If it sounds unfamiliar, it's a new name. We used to be the Department of Environmental Quality not that long ago. Usually I kind of start off talking about some circular economy concepts, particularly the concept that unless something is collected and turned into a new product, it is not truly recycled. But I'm not going to belabor that point because Heidi is going to tell us far more eloquently than I all the ins and the outs of the circular economy philosophy. I do, just to get us all on the same page, I do want to just throw this up on the screen. When we talk about recyclables here in Michigan, this is what we mean. You can see, you know, over half is traditional collected materials from residential and commercial customers, 20% organics, you know, yard waste, compostables, container deposits, that's the bottle bill material, and take back program materials, that's things like tires and e-waste and textiles and batteries and appliances and things like that. Here it is broken down by material type. And the one thing I'd like you to clock as we sort of skim by this slide is just remember there is a huge chunk of paper products right there. So why are we spending all of our time and energy, well, maybe you're not, but we are spending all of our time and energy working on recycling every day? And it's because it's a huge economic opportunity for our state. We collectively currently spend over $1 billion annually on solid waste collection and disposal. And of that material that goes to the landfill every year, a big portion of it, a sizable portion of it, is material that could be recycled or composted. And it's estimated that that material is about, the value of that material is about $350 to $600 million annually of material that winds up going into a landfill. But in order to get there, there's a huge investment that's really needed throughout the system by all of us. At the state, we have this big ambitious goal to triple our state's recycling rate. When we initially started talking about this, we were at 15, hovering around 15%. Now we're around 18, but the national average hovers around 35% for a recycling rate. So there's a huge opportunity for growth. And when we get to getting to that 45%, tripling that recycling rate, what would that represent? It represents 138,000 new jobs in Michigan, an economic output of $33 billion a year. I mean, that's, to put that in perspective, that's 3.3% of the overall economic output, which would put the industry above tourism and transportation in terms of like overall chunk of the economic output of Michigan. And then something that's probably near and dear to the hearts of everyone here is just the huge environmental and public health impacts of that kind of increase in recycling. It would mean it would be the equivalent of taking 1.5 million passenger vehicles off the road every year. The equivalent of energy conservation, the energy use of 760,000 households. And that's about 20% of the number of households in Michigan. So a huge, represents a huge energy conservation. So not only is increasing the recycling and materials management here in Michigan, not only is it a huge economic impact, but it would be huge in terms of public health and environmental impacts. We did some surveying in the early stages of developing a statewide or a statewide recycling education campaign, which I'm going to talk about more in this presentation. But surveying is always fun because you get to, you know, confirm the things that you were pretty sure of, pat yourself on the back, but then it's also really fun because you get to find out new things that you just are so surprised about. And I wanted to share a few of those findings. One of the key findings that we found was across the state, there is no demographic correlation for who recycles. Everyone across all demographic characteristics is equally likely to recycle. What it does depend on is access to convenient recycling opportunities. Another key thing that we found was that across the state, people overwhelmingly understand that recycling, they find it personally important, and they understand that it's good for Michigan's environment and economy. And we didn't know at the beginning if people understood that or if we would need to be focusing more on that when we were doing education. But what we really found was that people across the board understand that recycling is important, and across all demographic characteristics, they do recycle, but what it depends on is access to convenient recycling opportunities. So you'll hear how the state is working to address that and increase the opportunities across the state. recycling as a system, I'm sure Heidi will talk about this more eloquently than I, but like everything, it's a system, and all the different parts play together. In order to strengthen the system, you really need to strengthen all the parts of it. And I'm going to start by talking about policy, because I think that's a real interest for your membership, and it's a real call to action in terms of what you can do now to support what we're doing. So what do strong recycling programs have in common? I stole this from one of our partners, key partners, a national nonprofit called the Recycling Partnership. I encourage you, if you're interested in recycling, to check out their website. They have all kinds of amazing resources. And there's, you can see there's some details here that a lot of programs have in common. But the one thing is that these programs exist in a place where there is some type of public action that has been taken. So that means the regional or the county or the state government, there's some kind of action, a tool, a trigger that encourages, implements, incentivizes recycling. And to that end, we've been working so hard with, for years and years, hours and hours. I just really can't emphasize how much time has been spent on this on the part of a really amazing and large stakeholder group. Some of you are on the line and have been on some of these meetings, but Michigan Manufacturing Association, the Chem Council, the Waste and Recycling Association, the Michigan Recycling Coalition, the Association of Counties and Townships and Municipal League, and the list just goes on, and these folks have put in hours and hours of their time over the past 5-6 years. And it started with a series of 2 reports full of recommendations. Those are posted online if you're interested in really getting into the details, but we use those every day to guide what we do at the state. And they guided the work that went on by these same stakeholders later toward policy development. So our current solid waste law is called Part 115. And all of the stakeholders got together and used these recommendations to develop updates to this Part 115. And you can see there's just one page that's kind of like all marked up. But just imagine that going on for 200 pages, and that's what it is. So it is 200 pages long, and I'm going to sort of skim across the surface of this. But I am throughout going to remind you that there's more meat on the bones for those of you who really like to get into that kind of thing. We had some priorities going into the process, and that was to work with this huge group of stakeholders to try to develop policy changes that reflected the needs of everyone and increase materials management across the state, to develop stronger measurement and reporting of the materials. That's really key for us at the state level, to wrap our arms around that, to grow markets for recycled materials. Heidi's going to talk all about why that is so important. A statewide education and outreach campaign, that was the one thing that all stakeholders agreed needed to be done immediately. And it was one of the first things we started working on. And grants for recycling infrastructure, materials management, planning, and market development. I'll mention those briefly. We do a lot of work on those. So if I had to just summarize that 200 pages of proposed updates, it's 6 bills in the House right now. If I had to summarize it all, it's shifting our focus as a state from the current 115, which is focused on providing adequate landfill capacity in a safe way, and shifting from that to an integrated system of materials management, where the focus is on planning for waste minimization and recycling, materials utilization, and sustainability, and giving communities, counties, and regions the tools to do that work. We got a lot of goals here. I'm not going to get into all of them, but this top one for me really summarizes what we're trying to do, and it's provide a policy framework that supports investment in productive materials management as an economic driver. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some key aspects. Again, I'm skimming across the surface of some really really deep weeds. But I wanted to just kind of let you know functionally what this kind of means. Materials management planning is going to show up. It shows up a lot in these pieces of legislation, and it's currently counties are all required to have a solid waste plan. Some counties have done a lot of work on that, but many counties haven't really changed it since the 90s when they first created their solid waste plans. And through this legislation, counties would be required to update that and to create materials management plans that take into account goals and objectives towards recycling and waste utilization and waste minimization. So not just focusing on disposal capacity. And then we're also encouraging, counties would also be encouraged to work more regionally. I think, you don't have to be too involved in the industry at all to sort of instinctually know that waste doesn't stay within the boundaries of a county, and that it might be better to look at for instance, Ingham, Eaton, and Clinton County to work together to address things more regionally. And then this, I'm not going to go through this in too much depth, but a part of this proposal is some benchmark recycling standards. So, Ellen was talking about wanting to save the world. Between where we are now and saving the world, you got to have some interim goals to kind of get you there. And so between, here 15% and 45%, here are some goals that are proposed to move us along to where we need to be. Like, for instance, by 2025, 90% of single family dwellings in urban areas having access to curbside recycling. Now, I'm going to make a plug. If you would like to learn more, I would encourage you to learn more. Reach out to the Michigan Recycling Coalition. They have a great website. I just took a screenshot here. Part 115. And it's a summary of the 6 bills and what's going on and why it's important, but it's not so deep in the weeds that you wouldn't be able to understand it. It's just great for folks like you who are really interested. And if you're interested in supporting this effort, and this is something you want to support, I'd encourage you to reach out to your legislators and express your support. Other things, that's one part of, and it's a really, really key part of the system, but other things that we work on at the state are collection, processing, end markets, public-private funding. We have funding that we received through the Renew Michigan Fund. We receive it annually and starting in 2019, and we use that to do a lot of the work that I'm going to be talking about. And if you are interested in learning about upcoming opportunities, I'd encourage you to sign up for the Grant and Loan Opportunities listserv. You just go on any EGLE website, scroll down to the bottom, and there's a little red envelope that you click and it'll take you to the sign up. A lot of what we do is, at least in my team, is working on grants to address some of those infrastructure needs that we talked about. Every year the font on the slide gets smaller and smaller every year, and my goal is someday it'll just be like just dots that you can't even read. But you can see we've been doing infrastructure collection, processing infrastructure, education grants, market development projects, contamination reduction grants. You can see in 2019 when we first received the funding, a huge increase in what we were able to do with that. And I anticipate we'll be announcing our 2020-21 grant awards any day now, and we hope to have more opportunities available in 2021. We actually have a market development workshop going on right now as we speak, but I want to mention a couple key initiatives, particularly in light of all the circular economy stuff that Heidi is going to be talking to you about. We have something called the Michigan Materials Marketplace. That's a collaboration between EGLE and MEDC and the United States Business Council, and it's a network, an actively facilitated network for businesses, organizations, entrepreneurs to come together. It's folks who have material that they want to get, you know, they want to find an end user for it, or it's folks, entrepreneurs or manufacturers who are looking for a specific type of material. And this is a way for them to come together. It's facilitated. There are people behind this, you know, website, this platform that help do matchmaking. And we hold workshops for people to come together in larger groups. I mean, now it's virtually, of course. And we have a cool new initiative called Next Cycle. We're just getting that started, but I think we're all really excited about the projects that will come out of it. It's an idea incubator specifically to develop markets and uses for recyclable materials. And it provides technical support, business mentoring, all the resources that an idea would need to move from the initial stages through implementation to find funding, to find private and public and nonprofit partners. So stay tuned for that. And then a key thing I want to talk to you about is education efforts. You really can't have a successful recycling program without a recycling literate population, because it's really key. What you all do in your homes really affects the recycling industry as a whole. And so I was asked to cover not only what we do in the legislation, but a little bit about like recycling 101. So you're going to catch that I'm trying to mix a little bit of that in here and not take up too much time. So if you're unfamiliar with this, I do get asked this a lot when I'm interacting with the public, like, where does this stuff go? It just leaves my house, but where does it go? So it goes to this place called a material recovery facility. We refer to it as a MRF. And at a MRF, there are a series of conveyor belts and huge machines, you know, robotic scanners, all that kind of stuff that you might imagine would exist in one of these places to sort through the materials. But what I really want to draw your attention to is a slide with the people on it. There are always people involved. And so if you take nothing away from this presentation, just take this one item, there are people on the other end. And so please do not ever put in your cart or your bin something that you yourself would not want to touch. These are items, syringes. We're seeing a lot of used masks and gloves, chemicals, propane tanks and batteries, which start fires. And I know some of you are just like gasping, like, how could anyone? But this is stuff that that comes through every day, all the time, and they put these workers, the frontline workers, at risk every day. So if you take nothing else away, just don't put that stuff in your bin. When we say contamination, we don't actually just mean things that will hurt the workers. We actually mean two things. We mean materials that your MRF does not have the ability, the stuff where your materials are going, that sorting facility, they don't have the ability to sort for that material. Maybe it's number 7 plastics. They don't have the right machine to sort it out. So we mean either that, or we mean, you know, that spaghetti jar container that is half full. We mean something that, yes, glass is collected in your system, but yours is full of spaghetti sauce. So it's the right material, but it's prepared incorrectly. Here are some very common plastic bags is a huge, probably almost every recycling system across the recycling program across the state of Michigan and across the nation will cite plastic bags as the #1 contamination problem. Propane tanks start fires, food. I mean, all these things are what we're talking about when we mean contamination. And the contamination rates are very high at these facilities. 20% is a pretty common number. So just think about what that means in terms of 20% of the material coming through needs to be disposed of. And it's not just this, you know, it's not just the safety hazards that it can pose, or the fact that it gets caught in the machines. That's what the plastic bags get constantly caught in the machinery, and they have to shut the place down. And but also that contamination makes it much harder to produce clean materials on the back end for manufacturers to use. So why is this a problem? This is what we want. We want clean bale. This is called a bale. It's like a bunch of plastic that's been squooshed into a big square. And this is what will go to a manufacturer, and they will use this plastic to make something new. So kind of instinctively, you can look at that and be like, oh yeah, I'd use that. But if it looks like this or this, maybe I wouldn't want to use that. So the more of this that goes to the system, the harder it is to produce this, and the more you come up with bales that look like this. So the higher the contamination, the lower the value of the collected materials on the back end. And then the idea of wishful recycling is something that's very common in the industry. I mean, before I was in this, before I was talking about recycling 24/7, I was also a wishful recycler, and I'm sure some of you on this call are, because it comes from such a place of such a pure motivation. You want to send it because you're looking at the item and thinking, well, I don't know if this is recyclable, but I really hope it is, and maybe the experts at the MRF, they can sort it out. And so you throw it in the bin. But it actually makes it much harder on everyone because it's just more contamination that needs to be sorted out. So we always say, when in doubt, throw it out. And then this is just addressing, why it can be such a huge problem if you don't rinse and empty your containers. Remember when I said I pointed out that there was a lot of paper in the mix? That paper, those paper products, cardboard boxes, and those are very vulnerable to the other stuff, the spaghetti sauce or the wine left in the bottle. Once those have food spilled on them, or other the lotion from your bottle spilled on it, it makes it a much lower grade of material. And this is just another little item that we learned from our statewide education campaign. Basically what we learned is just because you're recycling a lot doesn't mean you're necessarily doing it correctly. So that would have been me. I know that I definitely was recycling, just collecting all that I could and driving it to my drop-off center. And then once I started doing this job, I was like, oh, that stuff wasn't recyclable. So, I mean, even I, who do this every day, I have to go on the Lansing website and check and make sure it's the right material, because it's hard to remember. To that end here, this is our statewide education campaign. It's the Know It Before You Throw It campaign, and the stars of the show are the recycling raccoons. Each raccoon represents a different material stream, like Carlos cardboard and precious metal. There's a lot of ways that you can interact with this campaign: billboards, TV ads, Twitter, Facebook. But I would recommend checking out the website as a first pass if you haven't had a chance to learn more about it. One of the sections that's really cool is this frequently asked questions section, and it's all those dinner party questions, is this stuff really getting recycled? What about China? Do I really need to rinse it? Is it really saving energy? All those kind of questions. What about bottle caps? That stuff is all on there, as well as a lot of great content, TV stories. There's a downloadable toolkit with flyers in English and Spanish, coloring page for kids or adults. And then I also want to point out that on our website, our EGLE recycling website, we have a number of resources that might be helpful for folks, including a guide, Recycling 101, if you just want to learn more about the system, why it costs money, guides to operational options, starting an office recycling program, starting a school recycling program, things like that. We are a bunch of people that you can reach out to. I know I went through just a whole bunch of stuff really, really quickly because I don't want to take up too much time, but and I know this is really small print, but if you would like to see this in bigger print and reach out to any of us, please go ahead and get on our Michigan EGLE Recycling webpage and look up any of us, and please feel free to give us a call. So I want to leave you with a couple calls to action. We would really appreciate your support on our legislation. If you'd like to learn more, go to the Michigan Recycling Coalition website to learn more about the Part 115 updates. It's 6 bills currently in the House. And then also, just on a personal level, if you do one thing today, just make sure you're putting the right stuff in the bin and that you've cleaned it out correctly, and don't put any plastic bags in there. Okay, I will hand it back to the folks in control, and please feel free to ask me any questions.
Is Heidi, are you all set?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
Thank goodness I rebooted, because there was no reason why it wasn't working. Thank you so much, Emily. It's such a pleasure to follow you. I really look forward to working with you a lot longer and ongoing beyond this webinar. So I'm really appreciative that we've had a chance to get to know each other. I'm going to go ahead. So I was going to go with big picture, and I'm trying to share my screen right now so we can get my PowerPoint up. And there we go. And then I'll go down to the bottom and get this on the big screen. Let's see, where is that? Oh, here it is. So we will do, there we go. So again, I'm Heidi Sanborn. I'm the Executive Director of the National Stewardship Action Council. And because we're on Zoom, this is kind of fun. We moved to Michigan when I was a kid in high school. I went to Portage Northern High School in Kalamazoo, and some of my dearest friends are there. My dad lived there until 2 years ago, and he's actually right here with me. There's my dad, Dr. Khan. And he wanted to come in because he's you know, from Michigan. He actually owned a company called Environmental Occupational Training Corporation, right? Consulting and Training, EOCT. So he's a postdoc in chemistry, and my mother was a master's in biology. So we've always been very interested in science and nature, and I'll talk a little about that, but that's where I get my passion for all of this. And I've been in the garbage industry for 30 years, and I've been working the entire time in Sacramento, California. Because it is a big state, 12% of the market. If we do stuff here, it matters to the rest of the country. So that's why I chose to stay here. But I'd love to get back to Michigan and work with Emily and all of you. So that's what we'll focus on now. So I started and founded the National Stewardship Action Council with our board. We advocate for a circular economy. I'll discuss what that is and what that looks like. And, you know, because we're from, you know, California, I talk about writing the script or rewriting the script, because the story we're in right now is bad. The ending is not good. So we've got to change the script and refocus our energies on what we're doing to get the right things to happen, so the outcome and the end of the story is a good story for the next generation. So our vision is that we attain a circular economy, and I will just quickly go through who we are. We're a 501c4, meaning I can lobby in any state in the nation. I founded the California Product Stewardship Council, which is a 501c3, 13 years ago. I turned that over last year to another person to run because we were being so successful in California at making the manufacturers have to rethink design and what they put on the market, that other states were asking for help and even national help in Congress, and I couldn't help them. I had no vehicle. So now we have the vehicle through NSAC. Our vision, again, is that we attain a circular economy in the United States so that everything stays in the industrial system. The earth is a circle. Everything in nature is recycled and is a feedstock for the next part of the system. We need to do the exact same thing with our industrial materials. And our mission is to do that through collaboration. Sometimes we can't collaborate. Sometimes there's industries that don't want to talk to us, to be honest. And I've been able successfully with our board and our partners to make a huge difference in spite of that, especially on medications and needles, which I'll talk to you about because I'd love to do this in Michigan. Our board is made up of people from all over the country, although we have no one from Michigan. I'd love to have somebody from Michigan join our board. But we've got consultants and people like Tim Goncharoff with the County of Santa Cruz that has led the nation on local ordinances mandating that manufacturers of needles and medicines take them back. Patty Garbarino is treasurer of the Marin Sanitary Service. Her father started the first curbside recycling program in Marin County in the 70s. Constance, who's a legal EGLE in our industry, she works the world for the World Bank. And then people like Maya, Jordan, Bob, Beverly, they're from all over the country doing medical waste, waste legislation, consulting. And I also want to point out the diversity of our board. That was not the case just a few months ago. We were horrified with what happened with George Floyd, and we actually did a call for new board members, and we received great applications. We have 4 new board members that are all people of color. And we're so excited about that because they're all highly qualified, and we wish we would have put the call out sooner. And we need to keep all our communities together while we drive for a circular economy that's fair for everybody. Our advisory board, the same. We added new members of our advisory board. All 3 men, people of color here, are new to our advisory board. They're all amazing. Inuit is from Europe. He's running the End of Waste Foundation that's focusing on glass and the use of blockchain to track the glass through the system where the manufacturers only pay for the end of life of what isn't recycled. And then our more members from Arizona, Gaica, which is working on, Jonathan's working on cannabis waste, which is another big thing we're all seeing now. E-waste solutions, chemo waste, which is a big problem people don't think about. So, and then our closest is Victoria Reinhardt in Ramsey County in Minnesota to Michigan. So these are our board members and our advisory board. So if we're going to rewrite the script to get a circular economy, we have to think and act differently, because as Einstein said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We can't keep doing what we've been doing, because if we do, we're going to keep getting what we've been getting. And what we're getting is not enough. We're not even close. We are on the edge of a cliff when it comes to materials management and the environment in this country and the world. So my story is to rewrite this script and to achieve a circular economy by 2030. And the reason I say 2030 is because the latest science shows us with climate change, which is extremely connected, and I'll talk about, is if we don't do something massively different within the next 10 years, it's way too far over the cliff. The automatic feedback loops of the world are, with the releasing of methane from the permafrost, for one example, is it's basically on the other side of the tipping point, and we won't be able to stop it. So we've got to design out waste and pollution. That's how the first part of achieving a circular economy. We've got to keep products and materials in use, not cradle to grave, but cradle to cradle. And we need to regenerate the natural systems we've been destroying that Earth needs for us to live. So that's how we're going to rewrite our story to get a good ending. And it's going to be hard. It's going to take all of us. So the circular economy, according to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, are doing those three things: designing waste and pollution out of the system, keeping products and materials in use, and regenerating natural systems. I'm going to talk about all three today and how we can do that with the waste management. And I don't even want to call it waste anymore, because all of these, I want to call it materials management. There is no waste. In the world that's a circle, everything is recycled for the next system. We have to do the same thing with our industrial materials. So why is this my chosen story? And Dad hasn't even seen this. I wanted him to see this. So since I was young, I've been worried because I had two smart parents who are educating me about nature. I've always loved animals, as you can see with our auntie's doggy there. And then my dad and my mom and my brother and I, they take us camping everywhere. And we even went to the National Federation, Wildlife Federation week camp, and I think it was North Carolina. And it was just beautiful. And I think I won the thing about going hunting and finding all the things that we'd learned about all week, the mushrooms, the nuts, the this, the that. And I learned how to love nature, and I was really worried about how we were destroying it, even back then. And in fact, I asked Dad, is Big Bird real? And I remember him telling me, no, it's based off a dodo bird and it's extinct. And I was horrified. I said, where did the dodo bird go? And he said that they were killed by human beings, that we invaded, the Dutch went to an island, Mauritius, and they literally, because they had no fear of humans, even though we're a large bird, they would just stand there and be killed. And then the rats, that came off the boats ate their eggs and blah, blah, blah. And I was just really upset. I thought, who has the right to take the ability for me to see a dodo bird away? Well, we're doing the same thing except worse to the generation right now that's coming up. Our script in 2020 is nothing short of a disaster. We have unprecedented loss of wildlands, unprecedented species loss, unprecedented heat, fires. We've got more fires in California today. I have friends evacuating today in 2 parts of the state. We've been breathing smoke here for a month. That is hazardous. We've seen 2 hurricanes hit at the same time this year in the United States. And we have an unprecedented number of humans demanding all these materials when we still have a cradle-to-grave system. We're at 7.8 billion people. When I was born, it was only 3 billion people. This story ending is not going to be good. We have got to change the story and the script. And I keep thinking, how bad are we going to let this get? The next generation now, I mean, every year we're losing species after species, and these are iconic species. We could lose elephants. We could lose rhinos. We've already lost the Sumatran rhino. I mean, this is just terrible. And it's not fair to the next generation. This was just weeks ago in Joshua Tree National Park. We're burning up our Joshua trees, which have been there for thousands of years. This was the sky from my car 2 weeks ago. It's not much better today. It was like that for almost 3 weeks. And our world population, as I said, we're now wildly out of control with population, with huge demands on Earth. And you can see over time, this is not sustainable. We may have done overshoot. And that happens in natural systems where the population will go too far because there's too much food, and then it plummets, and then at some point it kind of balances out to homeostasis. I'm really concerned we have overshot it. And if that wasn't enough, we got a global pandemic. And I'm not saying this to depress anybody, but we've got to get acting differently, or else we will keep getting the same and worse. So the pandemic, of course, we talk about natural systems. This is part of because we're not doing materials management right, and we're continuing to destroy virgin forests and go into places we've never gone, and it's releasing bugs, and we're eating things. That's what happened with Ebola. We went into the forest and ate monkeys, and they had these bugs. And this is a huge burden on the next generation. They are getting very anxious and depressed about this. That's on us. It's not their fault, and we shouldn't be saying, oh, you need to fix it. Because parents are literally telling their kids and teachers that it's up to them to fix it. And that's putting a lot of pressure on them. We've got to do this differently. So what is it going to take for us to change our script, to get to a circular economy? Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. That's Margaret Mead. And of course, I truly believe this with everything in me. And that's why I'm so excited to talk to you, because our script now has to change, and it's up to us to change it. Nobody is coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. So what are we doing? Well, what we're doing now is not nearly enough. We're moving way too slow. So we've got to get active, engaged, and be effective. It is not convenient to recycle as it was to buy, although I have to say the Michigan bottle bill passed when I was there, and it's still heralded as the best in the country with the 10-cent deposit. We're still talking in California about following you, so great job, Michigan. But funding for these systems is a constant worry, and I'm going to talk about following the money. If we don't set the money up to work for us and work against us, which is what it is now, we will keep getting what we're getting. So we're not circular yet. How do we get there? First goal of circularity is designing out waste and pollution. How on earth do we do that? Well, we got to get to the front end. We got to get to the producers. So we have to look at things like mandating changes in chemistry. I mean, voluntary doesn't work. If voluntary worked, we wouldn't have any of these problems. But we have them all, and they're dragging on because manufacturers have a fiduciary responsibility to answer to shareholders and make money. Most of them are not B corporations, which require them not just to be responsible for profit, but people and planet. If they aren't responsible or have to be responsible to people and planet, they hurt both. It's what we've seen over and over and over again. So we've got to start looking at mandates or changing the goals of these companies, or both. We can impose sales bans. They're difficult, but we can be doing them. We can mandate producer responsibility or extended producer responsibility, EPR, which means we're extending responsibility for the product, not just to point of sale, but well beyond through its entire life cycle. And when producers have to internalize those costs, they rethink design. If they can just externalize those costs onto government or the environment, they don't care because their legal responsibility is to make money for shareholders. So the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, has whole web pages about EPR, what the goal is. And I believe it shouldn't just be for household hazardous waste, but for everything. That the producers are the start of the problem or the solution, because what they choose, how they design something determines whether it's repairable, it is durable, it is recyclable, or it's not. And if they don't change what they do, we're at the back end just trying to catch everything with a catcher's mitt that comes on the free market that isn't designed for recyclability or having a market, and we're failing. So EPR, if imposed, aims at reaching two goals: shifting the responsibility away from government and the general taxpayer, which is socialized costs, up to the producer, and provide incentives to producers to incorporate environmental considerations in their design of the products. So again, the news flash, I know this is a surprise, but voluntary does not work. Voluntary is voluntary, and if it worked, we wouldn't have all these problems. So what we have to do is follow the money. How are companies making money? If they make money by externalizing these costs onto others, they will fight to maintain status quo if the only goal they have is to make money. They are not volunteering to pay the money for end of life. So the problem is that they're C Corps. If we go and encourage B corporations, which I'm actually working on here in the city of Sacramento, city of Philadelphia did this, where they actually gave tax breaks for any company to become a B corporation to care about people, planet, and profit. And they got flooded with applications and had to limit the amount of money that they were doing, because it was, people want to do the right thing, companies want to do the right thing, and when they get a little bit of a financial incentive, they follow that money. So again, EPR, if you want to get into the details about it, I'm a true believer, but it may not be for everything. There may be other tools we could use, and politically it's challenging, and I can talk about how we've won, but it's maybe hard to start out of the gate if you're not familiar with it. It's used widely around the world for 30 years. Basically, it says the manufacturer has a responsibility to design for recyclability and durability and repairability. And then the government does the oversight and sets the performance standards, and the residents have to comply and use the program that's provided by the producer. And governments can also, municipalities can help promote the programs and use the programs. They could even be part of the take back part of the program. And EPR addresses multiple issues. When the manufacturers have to internalize the costs that they have previously externalized, they rethink design and also material choice. So deforestation, which is devastating the planet right now, and forget about the fires. I mean, we've already lost in California the size of the state of Connecticut in a forest in a month. That shows, and that's releasing a lot of carbon into the atmosphere as well. Another snowball sort of effect of climate change. But all these things that you see here, whether it's carpet recycling, plastic pollution, landfilling, all these things can help to be addressed by an EPR system on different products. It can also start with green chemistry. There are certain things that just should not exist, in my opinion, and our opinion at the organization, because the chemistries are so dangerous. Like, they call them PFAS. But you've probably seen Dark Waters. If you haven't, I encourage you to watch the movie Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo. It tells about how Dow Chemical actually knew that these chemicals that we spray on Teflon pans and cook in are highly toxic and build up in our bodies. They're on carpet, sprayed as the stain master, and your baby goes on it. Well, that goes right through your skin and gets into your thyroid and causes all kinds of problems. So we've got to look at chemistry and not just, can we make the next cool marketable thing, but is it safe? And why are we doing this if we know it just is dangerous? They're even in the foam, that red retardant, that fire retardant, they're spraying all over our forests in California. We had to ban that, but the ban isn't in place for another 2 years. So unfortunately, with all these fires, it's now being spread through all our water system in California because of the fires. And I pointed this out to the hazardous waste folks I did a keynote to last week. Is this success when you have a hazardous waste facility and people in Tyvek suits that have to come to your car? I mean, why are we selling things that are this dangerous to every person in the public who may or may not read the directions and may or may not store it correctly, but we're getting really good at killing things. We have a lot of sides, biocides, fungicides, this side, that side, but guess what? It also can hurt us. And now we see all these cancer rates. We've got to rethink all of this. Circular economy goal number 2, keep products and materials in use. How on earth do we do that? We can mandate, again, the green chemistry. We can mandate that there's at least reuse to keep things in process longer, and we can impose return to retail requirements or incentivize them. So it's easier for people to return things like batteries to the retailer or electronics to where you bought them, or even through the mail. And we've had some successes. I helped write the bill back in 2002. That was a model for the nation on recycling paint, where the paint manufacturers take responsibility. But you'll notice of all the states at the top of their paint care website, we don't have Michigan. This is a low-hanging fruit. Let's get Michigan a paint stewardship program, an extended producer responsibility program, maybe next year if somebody wanted to work on it, because they've already done all these other states and it works really well here in California. We went from about 70 collection locations to over 800. Much more convenient. People can return the paint to the paint store they bought it from. The paint gets reused first at swap sheds, and the counties get paid for that. It also it pays for all the PR to educate the public about the program, and it also recycles the paint into new paint. And if not, they're creating new markets like colorant of stepping stones, for example. We could also work on household hazardous waste reuse. People think, why, we don't want to reuse household hazardous waste. Well, people buy bleach and cleaners all the time. That's all household hazardous waste. And if people don't use it and drop it off at a facility, we don't want to pay the money to burn it when somebody else is going to go out and buy another bottle. We'll just turn around and give it to them in a swap shed. Or we can do what's pictured here, use the Smarter Sorting, which is a new company that teaches employees of retailers or hazardous waste facilities just to scan the container, the QR code, and then it goes right into a reuse center, like a Habitat for Humanity reuse center. And people can buy it for pennies on the dollar, or you can give it to them. We can also promote things in Michigan like reusable 1-pound propane cylinders. Emily mentioned there was a big fire at a MRF in Michigan because they found 3 of these 1-pound propane cylinders had blown up because they still have gas in them. And when they're hit by one of those forklifts, they can spark a fire. And it caused a lot of damage, and our insurance costs are going way up in the industry because of all these fires we're having from batteries and gas cylinders. We are working with U-Haul. We can actually set up in Michigan a bunch of collection and sales locations with U-Haul to exchange these 1-pound propane refillable tanks, just like we do the 5-pounders. Easy peasy. I mean, we could do that even voluntarily before we have a law. And then later, once the infrastructure is there, if you wanted to, you could ban the sale of disposables and encourage only the refillables. So leaders think and talk about solutions. Followers think and talk about the problems. I want to share with you what the problems are, because you aren't familiar with the details of the problems in this industry. But we really want to talk about solutions. I think everybody needs some hope and needs to know what they can do to get there. So that's what we're going to go to next. Again, circular economy goal number 3 is to regenerate natural systems. Well, really this starts with creativity and design. And I just want to give you an example. How can we do that with materials? Plastic 6-pack rings were killing wildlife. They escape. The animals, when they're small, get through them. When they grow, it causes great problems and literally chokes them. This is a poor turtle that got stuck. But there was a great brewery in Florida that created a 6-pack ring that was made up of the brewery waste from brewing beer. And they made them into a 6-pack that's literally edible by fish. Now that is creative thinking. That is circular, and that's regenerating natural systems. We can do that with other things. So about solutions, there's all kinds of bill ideas I have for Michigan and things we could do locally and at the state level. Some are easier than others, but we could look at, is your state ready for a framework for producer responsibility for everything that's toxic and super expensive to manage? Pesticides, cleaners, all that stuff. Would you be open to banning the sale of toxics by the end of, I don't know, some date? Ensure that nothing is allowed to be sold by a certain date unless it's got a closed loop system. Our companies, they're not moving fast enough. So what are you doing to help get people elected to office who will help have these things happen? That's been a big problem in the last few years. Mandates for truth in labeling. We shouldn't be labeling things with chasing arrows. that are not recyclable. That was the plastics industry way to get everybody to buy plastics and make them feel good. But we know they're going overseas and not being handled properly. We know they're ending up in the water. Even if we have a very small amount escape, over time, the 7 billion plus people, it's still a lot of damage being done. So we got to get truth in labeling. Pressure campaigns on companies to drive changes in purchasing from the public. You vote with your dollar every single time you buy something. You're saying to that company, I like what you're doing, or I don't like what you're doing if you don't buy it. So the control is really with the purchasers, but they don't know it and they don't want you to know it. So that's being an educated consumer and voting with your dollars is a very powerful tool. And then taking companies to court. I mean, I have people out here that are now taking companies to court. One just won a Monsanto case about the cancer the Roundup caused, and that was a 10-year fight. It's not the kind of thing you want to do, but if you can't get an answer and you can't get the rights, wronged rights righted, then you sometimes need to go to court. So EPR, extended producer responsibility, is a policy tool in the toolbox. It's hard, but I can help you do it if you're interested. And one of the things, again, we're looking at in California, I'm chair of the State Recycling Commission, is possibly, we've had multiple requests for this, banning the sale of these wasteful 1-pound propane cylinders, which, by the way, are hot rolled steel and have a huge greenhouse gas footprint, for 1/4's worth of gas. Very wasteful, very poor packaging design, and very expensive. Some of these cost up to, we've seen up to $40 a piece to manage, to puncture them, ship them, but it's crazy. So that's a low-hanging. Now, I helped pass the first producer responsibility ordinance in the nation for medications, and that led to a, yes, pharma did sue Alameda County all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. But the good news is to impose producer responsibility for any product that has a health and safety impact. And I argue at this point, we have now proven that plastics are moving up through our bodies. They're in our water, in our air. And I think now we could actually have plastic packaging meet that criteria. But we won. The 2 lower court cases were upheld and found that there's no interstate commerce clause violation. Another thing we could do in Michigan is partner with companies like Inmar. Inmar is a reverse distributor. They work with a lot of large retailers across the country, have 80% of the market, and they have vowed to do take back voluntarily. They worked with a large supermarket chain, Albertsons Safeway here in California, and helped us get 320 of their stores with drug take back bins for free. And they've offered to do this around the country. If you'd like to work on that, we can do that with you, but we could also work on the legislation to make sure the producers ultimately pay for this. The drug companies certainly can afford it. We can all. But why are we allowing that? Because 99 cents is affordable to a kid. And that's how they're starting on their smoking habits now. But you can also require, and I have a model ordinance we could give you to use.
We're freezing up.
Sorry, I heard somebody. So you could return to retail. We could promote that. I've done that in California. But you've got to write your own script for what are you going to do to help support the main plot and the change towards ecotopia. What are your personal skills? Who do you know that's in power? Are you working on a campaign right now? We're in an election season of no other that's been this important. How can you, are your writing skills good? Do you like to do webinars like this one? But all those passions and skills can be harnessed to help you be impactful that helps change the storyline for the nation. And one of the things I just want to share, I actually ran for office 2 years ago and won. I now sit on the Sacramento Municipal Utility District Board with 6 of my colleagues. And We just passed the first resolution in the nation aiming for carbon neutrality by 2030 for any utility. So what made international news, and the reason I'm telling you this is your script could include running for office. Do not discount that. We need people, good people running for office and voting for the change you want to see in the world. We all need to vote next in November, and we need to make sure we're actively supporting candidates that do as we would hope. We also did a trip in, I realized our legislators just didn't have enough time to understand the materials management industry. So I literally joined a board called the California Foundation for the Environment and the Economy. I don't know if you have that in Michigan, but it worked really well. We took them to Vancouver, where they have a lot of extended producer responsibility programs running for 20 years, and to Seattle to meet with some of our colleagues on the West Coast. And we had the state treasurer, Fiona Ma, in the middle. We had on the far right, Jared Blumenfeld, the Cal EPA secretary, and many other legislators, et cetera. I'm there with the cricket hat. But that changed the game. They finally really got this because we spent a week with them teaching them about it. You can also join campaigns like refusing plastic. Plastic that's unnecessary, single-use plastic, is probably one of the most damaging things we could do. It's fossil fuel generated. It's creating climate change and giving money again to the people in power who like plastic. And it's not that we don't want to, you know, there's ways and uses for plastic, but we want to make sure we minimize, because it does escape and cause environmental damage. And again, modeling the behavior you want to see. There's all kinds of resources online of how you can have zero waste events. When we start getting back together, we don't want a bunch of plastic utensils and plastic cups and plastic. We need to start going back to reusables and encouraging people to use reusables. So let's get to work. Let's change the script. Let's model behavior, get educated and educate others like we're doing today. Collect data to back up your story and your efforts. Convene stakeholders, definitely find allies, and you've got to find political champions if you're doing anything political. Or you can become a champion, like I have, by getting elected. Write op-eds, articles, pursue local or federal action, send letters, but be at the table, not on the menu, and don't expect anybody else to do this change. We have to do it ourselves, and we're happy to partner with you as a national organization. So let's rewrite the script, let's get people in office that support us, and let's ensure a happy ending for the next generation. Because I don't want kids looking at us like Greta's looking here. But guess what? That little girl is changing the world all by herself, but let's give her some help. So with that, we've had wonderful people that we've lost this year, but if you see something that's not right, as John Lewis said, or not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to do something about it. And of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, real change endures, and enduring change happens one step at a time. So let's go out and change the world. Let's find our ecotopia. And thank you so much for having me. I really look forward to working with Michigan.
Thank you, Heidi, very much. We're going to ask a couple of questions of the two of you, and I'm going to hand it over to Elaine. I think we have a couple ongoing. Elaine, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'd ask Anna Scott to repeat her question on the Q&A because it disappeared before I wrote it down. But Carol Swinehart asks, does Michigan incentivize the manufacture of goods using recyclable materials? Oh, I'm sorry, that's for Emily. You're muted.
Yep, got it. Do we incentivize, so this is the use of recycled content.
Yes.
In terms of state law, now I'm going to just caveat here, I'm not like a legal expert. I do know that we have some laws for state agencies requiring a certain amount of recycled content, particularly in terms of the office paper. Not that that's super relevant at this one moment in time, but I'm trying to think of other ones where that's not been a huge push here in Michigan, not been a huge thing that's gone on here. to
I
date?
can say in California, it's been a very big thing. I just did a whole presentation on that. We probably led the nation on recycled content laws. And in fact, our governor just 2 days ago signed a bill that actually beats the European Union and says that plastic beverage containers have to contain 15% recycled content by 2022, 50% or 30% by 2025, and then 50% by 2030. And that's the strongest in the world. So it does work too. When they have to do it, they figure it out, and it really does drive the markets. So it's a great thing to talk about for Michigan.
Yeah, for sure. I know it's something that a lot of different folks in the industry would look on would, you know, love to have something like that driving some markets.
Heidi, a question for you. Which sectors have been most cooperative in reusing recyclable materials?
I would have to say paper. I think paper, but part of it was because early on we passed a lot in the country of laws on recycled content for printing paper and also even for newsprint in California. Of course, newsprint seems to be going away, but it was a highly effective law that we passed, and the industry was happy to use the pulp. It can be recycled. The fiber doesn't get too short until about 7 times through the system, so you can really save a lot of trees. And I think the paper industry has done the best job, but plastics has done the worst probably as far as using recycled content. And part of that has been that we have subsidized as a country virgin oil extraction to such a degree that it's almost impossible to compete price-wise with subsidized virgin material at that level. So one of the big things I encourage people to focus on is getting rid of the subsidies for virgin materials. That is completely, when you talk about following the money, you can't make the money work for recycling when we've got almost free oil, for example, or free timber from national forests.
Next question. Heidi, can you give an example of some incentives that have been offered to producers to redesign their products to be part of the circular economy, or at least halfway there?
Yeah, that's a great question, because obviously we'd rather do carrots than sticks. One of the things I found very difficult for some reason, though, when I talk to the companies, I can almost never get out of them what incentives would help them. I just think they're trying so hard to avoid any kind of anything that they don't even want to give us ideas on even incentives. But some of the incentives have been things like you can go with tax breaks, or what I do is when I write bills or work on bills that are going to mandate them to do something, I give them off ramps in the bill if they do the right thing and they do it early. So let's say if we want to have them have recycled content, 50% by, or 30% by 2025, if they meet it for every year earlier, they meet it, we would give them some sort of a tax break, or we'd give them something, some sort of a way that they could have a regulatory offer, or we say we're going to promote you too, but that's the government. See, this is where the government can only do so much, because the government can't pick winners and losers. So the rest of us have to be out here saying, wow, Coca-Cola met that goal early, we're going to promote that company. Ford did that to us. They said, we're going to pull copper out of brake pads. They did it way earlier, like 5 years earlier than the mandate. And we promoted the heck out of them. And we said, thank you. They changed and took, because that's a water poisoning metal that's ending up in brake pads, and they took them out 5 years early. So there's all kinds of ways to be creative, but typically I do regulatory off ramps where they don't have to do the reporting, or they don't have to do, something that others have to do because they haven't met the goals early.
Emily, is there any common element among states who have reached the 35% recycling? Is there something that they all are doing that gets them there?
I don't think there's like one silver bullet, but I do think that there's like a combination of things that a lot of successful states have worked on. I mean, there's like I kind of mentioned in my presentation, policy is a really important aspect, and there's a bunch of different, when I say policy, public action, some type of thing. It can mean a lot of different things for a lot of different states. For us here in Michigan, we're working on promoting materials management planning at the regional and county level, benchmark recycling standards. We were able to secure some funding in 2019, which is really key. So having some kind of policy and funding implemented is really key, at least at the state level.
For either of you, is Anna Scott asks, what is an example of a community incentivizing recycling that works?
And Heidi, you probably have a lot more experience. When I say incentive, there's so many ways that this could look. I mean, it could look like license, requiring that every waste hauler operating in the community also provide recycling service. It could mean distributing carts to every household. It could mean a lot of different things. But that's sort of what I'm talking about.
So I'd always say follow the money. So if you want people to do something, make it cheaper to do the thing you want them to do. So for example, we see a lot of problems with illegal dumping. I'm sure you've got that too, especially in rural areas. How do you the reason people illegally dump is because they don't want to pay for the disposal costs. If the disposal costs are built into the product up front, like our paint recycling bill, there's no benefit to them. There's only risk for illegal dumping, because if they get caught, they get a fine. It's free to return it, and we've made it easy by returning it to a paint store. So that's the kind of thing that we can incentivize. Things like tipping fees at end of life for anything will force illegal dumping to happen, because people aren't going to pay for it. It'll go in the ditch because if they think they aren't going to get caught. So if you can buy things back, like the deposit law, for example, is a great incentive to get those bottles and cans back. It was initially, when I was there, passed because of all the litter we were seeing. We had gone from reusable glass containers to these single-use disposable, and they weren't getting recycled. They were ending up on the side of the road. And it worked, because I remember how fast the roads cleaned up after they passed the first bottle bill in Michigan. There's all kinds of incentives that we can do for local, but pay-as-you-throw is a big one. So if you charge people at curbside more for the garbage and then less for the recycling and the organics recycling, if you've got that, like we do, we have 3-cart system here in California, mostly, that really does incentivize people. Like, unfortunately, though, sometimes they'll throw their trash into the recycling bin because they don't want to pay for a bigger trash can. You've got that, but so you have to do audits. But that's another way to incentivize recycling. And I would also say you have to make it easy. If we make it hard, you have to make it easy, free, and then you have to make sure they know about it. If you do those 3 things, you will get 80% compliance plus.
Yeah, at the state level, we really focus on increasing what we refer to as convenient access to recycling. We try to downplay the free part and really emphasize that recycling costs money. It is a service just like solid waste, and you should be expected to pay for that due to all the infrastructure behind it. But yeah, like Heidi mentioned, universal distribution of recycling. I mean, the way, and I think Lori Welch from the city's on here, but an example is the city of Lansing. I'm going to use that because a lot of folks in this call are familiar, but city of Lansing, everyone gets a recycling cart automatically. And then you sign up for a waste cart that corresponds to the amount of waste that you think that you'll generate. Like, you pay more for a bigger one and less for a small one. And so that's sort of what we're talking about in terms of ideal is the wrong word, but in terms of a really high functioning pay-as-you-throw system.
I just want to clarify, recycling is not free, and we don't like to say that it is free, but what we do say is that if you put those costs in the price of the product, when people see the product has value for them, it's automatically paid for at the back end. And then that way they don't have to, if they're, so that's part of this whole thing of getting to the front end of charging for the cost of end of life when they buy it.
Yeah, yeah. And you guys, Heidi, you did a great job explaining. You know, the conundrum there is that the end of life costs in terms of solid waste disposal and recycling, they're on the communities. It's really the communities that shoulder both the logistical hurdle, but you know, even if they contract it out, it's a significant cost that the communities deal with every year.
You know, paint literally is saving about $20 million a year in California for the local governments alone, because it was about half of what their household hazardous waste costs were. So just doing a paint bill, and I can work with the state if they're interested in all of you, but that alone would, and then it teaches everybody how these systems can work, where the manufacturers run the program. And it's really a smaller government, more free market approach. They know their product better than anybody in their retail chains, and it really does work. And we've got it now in 11 states.
Wow. Yeah, that's very cool.
Carol Swinehart wanted to know, you used the term social contract, Heidi, during your presentation. What were you referring to when you said that?
Although I have said it before, but it was probably basically what I think I was saying. I can't remember what I was saying it about, because I don't even remember saying it on this presentation. But social contract is generally when you have an agreement with society about how things are going to go. And companies right now, they're just wiping their hands of everything and just blaming the cities, and you're not doing a good job recycling, and you need a better MRF, and you need to spend more money. But that's not fair, and that's not working. So we have to rethink it. I think that's what I was referring to.
And
maybe just one more question, Elaine. Just one more question.
Just one more. Yeah. Isn't the Tri-City area here in Michigan getting a new MRF?
I'm guessing you might mean like Clinton, Eaton, and Ingham County.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a new MRF that's been in the works for many years, and I just can't say enough about how well everyone here in the Tri-County area, the capital region, works together. And you know, that's not something that's easy to do, and everyone works together so well here. But yeah, after many years of work, there's never been a recycling processing facility like, you know, we showed on the screen with all the big robots and all the sorting equipment. There's never been anything like that here in mid-Michigan, and it's a real constraint on the system. You can't collect more material, or if you can't process it. Our material currently, our recycled material, all goes to southeastern Michigan or Traverse City, and so, maybe a little bit some to West Michigan. But it travels a significant distance in order to be sorted out, and that's, you know, that really impacts the cost and the overall, you know, carbon footprint of the system. So yes, it will be opening end of October, I believe, is what it's slated, when it's slated to open, and that's a really big deal, and we're really, really excited about it. And there's going to be an education center associated with it. So at some point when we're all allowed to get back together again, we'd love to be able to offer your members maybe a tour of the facility. Like Heidi was showing, you really can't replace that experience of putting on a hard hat and just walking through the facility and seeing what it means, and seeing a giant Gaylord box of propane tanks that have come through, and, you know, just meeting the people that do the sorting. And it's a fun experience.
Well, I think I need to wrap it up for the group. We said 1:15. We're running a little bit longer, but I want to thank all the speakers and the members and the guests, certainly. I also wanted to let everybody know that the webinar will be placed on the Lansing League's YouTube channel, and you can also be able to link to it from the League of Women Voters Lansing website, which is LWVLA. We need to continue the discussion. I think we covered some really good groundwork, and we have a lot to ask both of our speakers after this webinar is over and see what we can do. I wanted to say that the League has taken positions on several Michigan proposals, including an expanded bottle bill, which is gravely needed. From originally passed in the 70s, it is a model 90% success rate, right, in returning the bottles, and now we have everything in bottles and various containers that are not getting returned, and so it really needs to be revisited. But hopefully we can post our legislation, Donna, on your website so that you can see what we've done. And we'd just like to say that we're looking forward to charting that new course with you towards a healthy environment, and the most effective tool you have to impact the issues, Donna reminds us all, is your vote. So thank you again, and that's the conclusion of our webinar.